Good Friday afternoon to everyone. Hope you're all well. My name is Brett Cohen from Janus Henderson, and I'm here to talk to you today about a program that we've been running for about 15 years called Energize for Purpose. One of my favorite things to do, even if it is on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, between us and probably some cocktails, but happy to be able to deliver this for you. Again, one of my favorite things to be able to do. I'll give you a little bit of background. I work for Janus Henderson, been there for over 16 years. And about 14 or 15 years ago, our company decided that we were in a job that was pretty high stress and pretty demanding. And they wanted to send us away to a place called the Human Performance Institute to kind of re-energize. And the Human Performance Institute, as you can see on the next slide, is an organization that's been around for over 30 years. And it's got a very interesting history. There's two people, Jim Lair and Jack Gropel, who started the organization about 30 years ago. And actually how it started was they got a client that some of you may have heard of before by the name of Jimmy Connors. Jimmy Connors, obviously a high performance, one of the top tennis players, obviously in the world, or maybe even in history. And Jimmy Connors came to them with a problem. He said, you know, these tennis matches are extremely long and they're often played in really difficult conditions with high heat, high humidity. And one of the examples that he gave was the US Open. And he said, I'm really having a difficult time getting through one of these matches. The humidity in New York in August is unbelievable. The temperatures sometimes are brutal, and these matches are lasting a really long time. And if any of you remember when he made that big run, I can't remember what year it was at this point, but he made that run when he was a little bit older, maybe he was 40 years old, and some of those matches were going like 5+ hours. And he said, I just can't maintain my energy for this length of time, and came to Jim and Jack, and they started to work with him on energy management. And that's what today is about. And that's what and that's what we're going to work on and go through some of the different attributes of that. When you look at the Human Performance Institute, you can see on the next slide, they've worked since with a lot of different professional athletes. They started with Jimmy Connors and really kind of made their name initially in tennis. Andre Agassi's worked with them. Pete Sampras has worked with them. Monica Seles, Jim Courier, you can see some of those names on this slide. But then they branched out. They worked with lots of golfers, Mark O'Mara being one of them, a big name. Even worked with the boxer, Ray Boom Boom Mancini. For those of you remember, if you remember Dan Jansen, also a client of theirs. And when Janus Henderson sent us down to the Human Performance Institute, we spent the better part of a week there. There were 6 guys from the Baltimore Ravens football team that were working with them. So they bridged the gap with a lot of different sports and a lot of professional athletes. What ended up happening is they realized that with, through professional sports and professional athletes and all those different concepts that they use with them, that they could take that to the corporate world, because our lives are demanding as well. They may be a little bit different, but they still require you to have good quality energy over long periods of time. So if you flip to the next slide, we could start to talk about HPI, as I'll refer to them, the Human Performance Institute, but their thought processes in terms of how it relates to training. And they always think of it in terms of this pyramid, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Those are the 4 stages of the pyramid. And they always say that you work up the pyramid, but you become extraordinary when you come from the top and go down. I'll give you an example. My oldest son now, actually, I can't believe it, but about to graduate from college in a couple months here. But when he was younger, he was really into baseball. We played constantly, different tournaments all over the place, et cetera. And I remember when he was a little kid that we started really from the physical part, right, with baseball. And we got to a point where it was like, could he hit the ball? How strong was he? Could he throw the ball across the diamond? How fast was he running to first base? Was he good at sliding? All these physical things. And we kind of worked on those, and, he was doing well with that, but of course he was, a young kid. And of course you get up there and strike out, and you had this emotional aspect. where you are trying to fight through, the crying, and we've all seen that before. It's unbelievable, right? When the kid strikes out and is crying and runs back to the dugout, and they learn as they grow to become, to deal with the emotional aspects of something. Then we got to the point when he got a little bit older where we worked on the mental aspect, and I finally started to see as he grew and he grew, and from a maturity standpoint, that he was mentally much more engaged, and he was really able to focus and pay really close attention to what was going on within the game and start to learn the different nuances and so forth and so on. And then the final level that HPI would talk about is they call it spiritual, but I'll just relate it more to purpose, right? Is that what are you playing for? What are you doing something for? And again, you work up this pyramid, right? Starting with the physical and then the emotional and then the mental. But what makes someone really extraordinary is when they have a great reason for doing something and then they push that down and they use that to drive all the other stuff. A good example, I think, would be you always hear of people, and we're pretty new in the year here. You always hear of people with the New Year's resolutions, and of course, there's the joke, the typical one, like, all right, here it is, January 1st. What am I going to do? I'm going to lose weight, and that's your typical New Year's resolution. But whatever it may be, whatever that resolution is, the question is, why do they often fail? And they do fail a large portion of the time, not always, but a large portion of the time. And the reason is that because the calendar changed is typically not a strong enough or good enough reason for doing something that's very difficult. Change is very hard, and it's difficult to do things that are not customary to you or are not comfortable to you. And if you're going to do those things, you really need to have a great reason for doing it. So as we talk about some of this stuff today, there's probably going to be a couple things that you say, yeah, you know what, that would be a good thing for me to incorporate in my life, a different thing to do, to be a little bit better, to feel a little bit better. It's probably not going to be easy. So I'd encourage you all to think of a good reason for doing it. You're doing it for something more than, just for the reason of doing it, but for some other purpose or something that's super important to you. So if we flip over to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit just for a second about rituals, because rituals are really important. If you want to make a change in something, the easiest way, I should say, to make a change is to make that change a ritual or a habit. And we live our lives by habit. Most of what we do every single day is because we've been doing it. So you got to do these things on a regular basis. You've got to stick to it for a period of time so it becomes a habit. And it's just important to note that as we kind of move along here. So let me talk about stress and recovery. I used to really gloss through this part of the presentation, but I think this year has obviously been extraordinary, where stress has been at a level that I think most of us have not experienced before. At least for me personally, I'll just be perfectly frank with that. I think that the stress is just has been really unbelievable this year, and part of that is that it's different for everybody. This work from home situation, some people may really like it and it may be great for them. Other people, it's very difficult for, and the stress is, and things are different. And when things are different, it becomes stressful. So for me, for example, I don't really like sitting here in my house all day. Personally, I would like to be, more engaged with people on a face-to-face basis, and being home, doing a lot of stuff virtually, Zoom on the computer. To me, that's difficult. I also, I mentioned that my oldest son's about to graduate college. I have another in college. For some people, it's having young kids at home. I don't have that, but I know this is kind of funny, but one of my biggest stress situations is my dogs. The dogs are here for whatever reason. I don't know why, but they have this major issue and problem with, the UPS, FedEx, or Amazon, person that comes down my street 83 times per day, it seems. And of course, it's always when I'm on an important Zoom or phone call. So, stress is a funny thing. The key to having stress is not the problem. The key to it is to understand that you need to have recovery time. And it's really no different than if you were working out. And let's say you were going to do a bicep workout, right? And you were going to go to the gym and you were going to do a bunch of curls, and you do a bunch of curls. And if you went and did those curls today, that'd be great. Your arm would be sore tomorrow, right? And then tomorrow, if you just went and did them again, did a whole bunch of curls, your arm's going to get even sore, and you're not giving it time to recover. And without the recovery, it doesn't grow. So stress mentally is really no different than that. It's okay to stress, and it's good to stress, but what you need to do is you really need to give yourself time to recover and then build back up. And as you think of your day, you should think of your day in this capacity. And when we were down at the Human Performance Institute, they were very particular about this. And I think in this environment, it's even, it's even more important to mention it. I find myself, I'm here during the day, and typically in past, before the COVID situation, I would, go out to lunch and I'd have really a mental break. Well, now I go from my office right here, right down there, to the kitchen, and I make myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or whatever it may be, and I eat it, and I'm done in 10 minutes. And then I go, what? I'm back into my office. I'm not giving myself that mental break. And you kind of feel bad. You're like, well, I mean, should I sit down in the family room and watch some TV? And you feel bad doing that. But I think it's important that you recognize that it's not bad, that you need the recovery time. You need a break, whatever that break was. And it's different than it used to be, right? For me, it used to be getting in the car and driving to lunch and then driving back, and then your brain is clear, and then you can come back and work, and you're not getting that now. So please, I'd encourage everybody, make sure that you are giving yourself some recovery time and some breaks. And if you're at the desk all day, get up, go outside. If you have the dog, take the dog for a walk. Just walk around the block, go upstairs and downstairs. Get some breaks within your day to clear your head, to walk away from the screen, to walk away from the Zooms and the phone calls and whatever the situation is on a daily basis, and then come back to it. So if you flip to the next page here, we'll talk about this energy audit. And I'm not going to really go through this, but I believe at the end of this, we're going to be able to provide you with this workbook. And I would highly encourage you to go through this. If you could see, you'll see here on this page, it talks about the physical truth. And there's some really, every single thing on here is something that that you should either do, or you're not doing, or it's good to do, or it's bad to do. You'll see what I mean as you go through it. I highly encourage you, because it really points it out to you. And if you're going to make changes, it's good to write it down. And this will kind of remind you of all these good and bad things that you can or cannot do, right? And you could check them off, and you could start to see them. And I think that will give you a roadmap for a couple things that you want to tackle out of this. So if you flip to the next page, you'll see after physical truth, you'll see there's emotional truth. And you could see some of these things that are on here: overreacting emotionally, overly frustrated by work, constantly seeking praise, defensive, all of these different things. I'm a poor listener, overly judgmental, lacking trust, impatient. If you look down at the mental truth, there's lots of different things. And you're not going to obviously check everyone. I hope that you don't, but I think it will give you a good roadmap for some things that you want to tackle. So if we just flip a couple more pages up to the if you go one more page, I believe, we have this self-assessment. This is kind of at the end. I think this is really, it's great. It's just a little test that will actually give you a score. And again, you could do this on your own when you get the workbook, but it talks about how much physical energy do you have, right? And then what's the quality of your emotional energy? How focused are you? How committed are you to your purpose? All of these things, you could put the score, and you could kind of get an idea from a self-assessment standpoint of where you stand. So I think between the other part and this part should give you a good roadmap to being able to understand a little bit about where you're at currently, and maybe some of the things that you want to take on to make you feel better, both emotionally and physically. So if we flip to the next page, it talks a little bit more about stress. And I think this is important just because it talks down there, you can see halfway through the page about the typical profile of the business professional. And I think this is really interesting, right? That often we feel stressed, right? And part of that is because we have too much stress. Part of it's because we don't have enough stress, right? And often we don't feel good because we're not stressing ourselves enough. And for a lot of people, it's both from a physical and kind of a purpose standpoint. And then, unfortunately, what happens is we're also not giving ourselves enough recovery. And we're not giving ourselves enough recovery in both the mental and kind of emotional aspects of things. So really important to kind of know. I mean, not everybody is here. I mean, certain people I'm sure are doing a great job physically and working out and really pressing themselves and stressing themselves. Other people maybe not as much, where other people may be, doing great with family and feeling really good about the amount of time they're spending there, but not in other areas. So just know there's lots of different ways to look at this. The important point is to take kind of a self-assessment of yourself and try to figure out where you're at and what areas you think that you can improve to make yourself feel a little bit better. And as you feel better, you will have better quality energy. So if we flip to the next page, this is the part of the presentation I actually really like a lot. And I have really taken this to heart in the last 14, 15 years after going to Human Performance Institute and being trained on delivering this to people around the country. And that is talking about physical energy and understanding the way food works within your body so that you can have good quality energy throughout the day and feel good. And I think this is where most people really fall down. There's a lot of bad habits out there. There's all sorts of diets that cause issues and so forth and so on. So let's just start up at the top and talk about this survival-based eating. And here's the first concept that I really want to hammer home to everybody. I think this is so important. And that is, at the end of the day, food is fuel to your body. And if you start thinking of it that way, and you think of eating as a way to fuel your system so that you feel good throughout the course of the day, it will change everything. Okay, so the chart at the top, you could see there where it talks about no breakfast and then lunch and then dinner, and it's going up and down like that. That's kind of like your typical person. A lot of people in this country that eat this way. It's not a particularly healthy way to eat, but for whatever reason, we've become accustomed to doing it. A lot of people do not eat breakfast. They skip breakfast. I actually kind of have this disagreement, I'll call it, with my wife all the time. She just continues to say she's just not hungry at breakfast. And I say, you don't have to eat a lot, Susan. You just should eat something. Just put a little something in your body. But unfortunately, a lot of people do this. They don't eat breakfast in the morning. And then it gets to about lunchtime and they are absolutely starving. And they're so hungry that they just can't help themselves, and they stuff themselves and they eat a ton of food. And then they feel this guilt thing going on. Oh, I ate too much for lunch. I shouldn't have had, the burger or whatever. And they decide they're not going to eat again. And from 12 o'clock or 12:30, 1 o'clock on, all the way till dinner, they don't eat again because they feel really bad about it, until the point where it's just before dinner and it's 6:37 and they are absolutely starving again. And they can't help themselves and they stuff themselves again. And then they feel bad about it. And then they don't eat the rest of the day. And then they go to bed. And unfortunately, a lot of people do eat that way. And it's not healthy, from a lot of reasons. Number one is, and I don't need to tell you this, actually, I had this exact thing happen to me today. I'm usually pretty good about it. But I happened to have a lunch meeting today at a meeting today. I'm sorry, I wish it was a lunch meeting. A meeting today at 11:30. And I had eaten breakfast. But at 11:30, I went to this meeting thinking it would be about 45 minutes, and it ended up being 2 hours. And when I got out of the meeting, I had such a headache, and I felt myself shaking, and I had had some coffee, and I really felt terrible. And then I went, and I was really cognizant about not trying to overdo it at lunch. But if you don't eat something for a long period of time, what happens? You get moody, you get kind of low energy, and often you get a headache. And that's the way I started to feel, was a little bit headachy and just not good, right? So It's also not good from you from the standpoint, if you haven't been eating for a while, your body still needs energy. And let's go back to the beginning part of what I said, which is food is fuel to your body. Your body doesn't just operate out of thin air. It needs energy for your heart to pump, your lungs to breathe. All these things that are happening are burning a lot of energy, and it needs to get that energy from somewhere, right? And there's really only three places that your body could get energy from: the food that's currently in its system, your muscles, or your fat. Okay. So one thing that we like to talk about through HPI is if you think about your fat, that's like your 401k. If you think about your muscles, that's your savings account. If you ever had a short-term deficit for the month in paying some bills, does anyone go to their 401k to pay their bills? No. Where do you go? You go to your savings account. You have a little slush fund or something. Boom, you go pull it out. You pay the bill. Something came up. You had to buy new tires for the car or whatever it is, and you pay it out of that. You would never go to your 401k. Your body's the exact same way. If it has a short-term deficit as it relates to energy and glucose in the system, and it needs some energy, it doesn't go and take it out of your fat. You wish that it would. That's not the way that it works, though. Unfortunately, what it does instead is it goes to your muscle, and you burn muscle, right? So if you look back at this chart on the top of the page, unfortunately, what a lot of people end up doing all day is they burn muscle in the morning because they haven't eaten anything, and their body still needs the energy. And they burn muscle till they're starved, and then they go and they put too much glucose in the system, and it's too much, and it overrides it, and they end up storing a bunch of fat. I'll give you one more example that I think is a good way to think of this. If I've lived down here in the Carolinas for about 16 years. We're originally from New Jersey. We used to do that drive a lot of times, and you'd get in the car here in North Carolina, and you fill the car up with gas, and then you drive. Wouldn't it be nice if you could fill the car up all the way enough so I could get all the way to New Jersey? Well, that would be great, but it doesn't work that way. The car could only take so much gas at any one particular time. It wouldn't do you any good if you filled up the tank and said, you know what, that's not enough for me to get up to New Jersey. So you know what I'm going to do? Sue, pop the trunk. Let's pour some gas into the trunk and we'll fill it up. It doesn't work. You can't do that. And the body's the same way. If you overdo it and you put too much fuel, if you will, into your own system, the body can only take so much at one particular time, and it ends up storing that excess as fat. So as you go back to that chart, what a lot of people are doing are they're burning muscle. They're burning muscle, and then they overdo it, and they put too much into the system. The body can't handle it, and it stores fat. And then they starve themselves, and after a couple hours, the body starts to go back into this emergency mode. It starts to burn more muscle during the middle of the day. Then they're starved. They overdo it, eat too much for dinner again, store a bunch of fat, and then don't eat and burn muscle in the evening. You've probably heard people say that you should have lots of small meals per day. Well, this is the exact reason for it. You should be eating something every 3 to 4 hours so that you can maintain a level kind of glucose level throughout the day, so that you don't, number one, that your energy is more consistent, so that you feel better. You're not having these headaches in the morning, not feeling after lunch tired and bloated and having what we call the food coma, if you will, right? So you want to, instead of having this up and down, you want to try to level that as much as you can. And by having lots of small meals per day, you're able to do that. The other thing that we'd encourage you to do, and a lot of people, again, don't do this. They have different, thought processes around food. We'd encourage you to eat a really balanced diet of proteins, grains, and fruits and vegetables every single day and every single meal, right? So you want to eat reasonable portions, smaller portions. You're going to have to lower the amount that you eat at meals. And then what you're going to do, as you could see in that bottom chart, is you're going to supplement that with snacks. So if we flip to the next slide, I'd like to talk about snacking for a few minutes, because I think snacking is a very important aspect to this whole thing. We've always thought of snacks like when you were a kid, like stop snacking so much, and eating the Cheetos or whatever. That's not the kind of snacking that I'm talking about. I'm talking about strategic snacking. It's filling the gap. It's as your glucose starts to drop in between these meals to just give yourself a little bit of a pick-me-up to get you to that next meal. So smaller meals with small snacks in between. And the key to the snack is a couple things. Number one is it should be a low glycemic snack. And then the other thing is it should be between 100 to 150 calories. So if we could flip to the next slide. Yeah, this will be in the back of your workbook, in the appendix back there, but I'll go through some of this right now so you understand it. Low glycemic foods are foods that are not going to spike your sugar level, spike your glucose level. You want to pick things that are lower glycemic, that are going to be a little bit more even keel. Some of these things obviously will be pretty, they'll be pretty obvious to you. Others of them, not so much. Things like nuts, beans, things high in protein, those tend to be lower glycemic foods. And then the higher glycemic foods are obviously things that are high in sugars, alcohol, that type of stuff. So things, it's funny, I have a friend of mine, we always have this argument about watermelon, and he's saying watermelon's so good. I'm like, no, watermelon is a high glycemic food. It's basically water and sugar. It's not great. I understand that it comes, out of the ground, but not everything that comes out of the ground is great for you. Another thing is bananas. They're not a high glycemic, but they are moderately glycemic. So it's important to note this. If you flip to the next page, you could see what we can do as it relates to snacks. You could actually combine things to lower the glycemic level of the food. So while a banana may be a moderate glycemic food, you could combine that with, say, a little bit of peanut butter to bring that level down. But always keep in mind that you're trying to keep the snack between 100 and 150 calories. Now, let me give you one more piece of information that I think is pretty helpful. This is a little bit of a numbers thing, so it may be something you want to write down. But if you're looking at a label, there is a way to kind of tell, at least get a good ballpark, if something is is low glycemic or not. So here's the formula. If you have something that's 100 calories, if it has 5 or more grams of protein for 100 calories, that would generally be considered low glycemic. It's a great way to look at a label on the back of a box and see if something is low glycemic. So for every 100 calories, if it's got 5 or more grams of protein, then it's low glycemic. So if you're looking at something that's 200 calories, it needs to have 10 or more. Now, there's one more thing that you can add to that. Fiber. Fiber can also help lower the glycemic level of something. So I'm going to give you one more formula. For every 3 grams of fiber, that's equal to the equivalent of 1 gram of protein. So I'll say that again. 3 grams of fiber is the equivalent of 1 gram of protein. Okay, so if you have something, I'll just harp on this one more second. If you have a 100-calorie snack, that's 4 grams of protein and 3 grams of fiber, then it's considered low glycemic. And the closer you get to that number, the better it gets as it relates to the glycemic index. Obviously, if you only come up with, 4 grams of protein for 100 calories, that's clearly better than something that's 1 or 2 grams or no grams of protein. Okay, so I think that's helpful in terms of trying to figure out whether something is a good snack. Keep the snacks 100 to 150 calories. Try to eat smaller, well-balanced meals. Supplement that, and you want to eat something no more than every 4 hours. Your body starts to convert to burning muscle after every 4 hours. So keep it, every couple hours. I'll go, in the morning, have breakfast at 6:30 in the morning, 9:30, have a little bit of a snack, 12:30, have a small lunch, 3:30, have a small snack, try to eat dinner around, 6:30, 7, somewhere in that range. And then maybe around 9:30, have a little snack, and I go to bed around 11. For me, that's what works for me. Everyone else to figure it out. But try to eat something small every 3 hours. And it is unbelievable, number one, how much better you'll feel. And in many instances, you'll actually start to lose a little bit of weight if that's something that you're shooting for as a goal. It's a lot of times you don't really have to, but when you're handling things better inside your body and your body's working more efficiently, often a nice byproduct of that is that you'll lose a little bit of weight, which is really great. So I have a question here about daily fasting. That's obviously a big topic of, it's a big topic right now. Everyone's doing these intermittent fasting diets. We don't believe in that, that's good. We believe that you are burning muscle throughout the course of the day. You're not building muscle, but burning it. So you're not really building your fat. It's a short-term solution. A lot of people like it because they feel like they lose a little bit of weight quickly. It also hinders the way you feel. And again, remember, this is not really straight about losing weight, but I could tell you, if you do this, you will lose weight and you will feel good throughout the course of the day, which is really what we're trying to do, is have good quality energy throughout the day. And I see this question here about a lot of skepticism about the benefits of traditional breakfast. We do not believe that. We have a lot of research, and the Human Performance Institute has been doing research on this for 30 plus years, and that is not our opinion at all. That breakfast, that old adage that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, we really believe that it is. Matter of fact, we didn't really touch on this, but one of the studies that we've done is we've taken people that were athletes but skipped breakfast and would work out in the morning. So this is something that a lot of people do, is right, they'll get up first thing in the morning and they go right to the gym, or they go for a run and they wouldn't eat anything. And we took people that had been doing marathons. We had a specific example even at our company, was someone that had been a marathon runner and had run these marathons for years and always kind of came in at about the same time, went to the Human Performance Institute, started to convince them to eat a little something prior to working out in the morning with their training workouts. And it doesn't have to be a lot. I mean, you're really just trying to trick your body out of this starvation mode, so that instead of it burning muscle, it goes and burns the food and then the fat in your system, right? And it was just amazing. The time, after years and years of running marathons where it had been very stagnant, dropped significantly right after that. I'm seeing a question here about dairy, eggs, meat versus a vegan diet. We actually believe that healthy fats are excellent and important, important part of what you should. A lot of questions here, trying to read them all. A very important part of the day. Eggs are actually very healthy for you. Obviously, dairy. I mean, certain people have allergies that they have to deal with, and we see a lot of that. But we actually believe that a balanced diet is a good diet. Now, certain people have reasons for not wanting to eat meat or not wanting to eat eggs. My wife happens to not eat any sort of red meat or chicken. She does eat fish, and I can't convince her otherwise. She feels that way, and that's okay. And she tries to find protein other ways, and there are ways to get other protein. But I think that if you are vegan or have one of these other diets, that you have to be very cognizant of making sure that that you get enough protein into your diet. So I think we're going to move on. I'll answer this last question, I think, about hydration. Absolutely critical to stay hydrated. And most of this country, it has been shown, is dehydrated and lives their lives dehydrated. And particularly with the amount of people drinking coffee and alcohol, which dehydrate you, are major problems. So we would just continue to say, make sure you are getting enough water, particularly, into your system. So if we move on to movement, super important here. If you really want to feel good, in addition to having good quality energy from what you're eating, you need to move. And there's three main components that you really should continue to keep in mind as it relates to movement. Number one is aerobic. Number two is resistance training. And number three is flexibility. And all three, I will say, are equally as important. And I will say that as you get older and older, and I'm 48 now, and I kind of start to see my flexibility has gone way down. But you want to continue to keep up the strength training and the flexibility training. Super important. As it relates to aerobic training, I would highly encourage everyone to, instead of doing what a lot of people do, which is just hop on like a treadmill and just put it on a speed of 6 and go for on and on and on, instead of doing that, to do interval. And what you want to do is you want to get on a treadmill, do a quick warm up, raise the speed, get the heart rate up, preferably wear a heart rate monitor. You could track your heart rate, get it up for 3 minutes, get it down, go to a walk, go to a slow jog, go up for 3 minutes, get it back down for 3 minutes, go to a slow walk and jog, and do that 3 or 4 times, and that's your workout. You could bang it out super quick, and you get a lot more. In a 20-minute interval workout, you could get more benefit than in a 40 or 50-minute steady workout. So do your aerobic training, try to keep it, try to keep it with intervals if you can. Keep up the strength training, keep up the flexibility training, all extremely important aspects. If we move to the next slide, and we're kind of getting close to wrapping it up here, but let's just talk about recovery, because as much as you could stress your body physically with workouts, and you could do aerobics and you could do strength training, it's like we talked about earlier as it relates to the bicep. You need to give you need to give your body time to recover. Part of that is recovery from exercise, and part of it, and I think this is extremely important now, is getting good quality sleep. And it goes back to habits, getting into a good habit for your sleep, with your sleep habits. Try to get to bed at about the same time every single day. Try to wake up around the same time. Try not to use your phone right before bed. If you wake up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, try to get right back into bed and go to sleep, and don't turn on your phone and look at anything. So all of these things are really important in terms of you having really good quality energy throughout the day. So if you flip to the next page, we'll just talk quickly about mission. But before I just hit that, let's just reiterate that stress and giving yourself proper recovery time as it relates to stress throughout the day, and breaks, trying to eat a consistent glucose level throughout the day, smaller meals, snacks in between, super important. And then working out, get that interval training in, get up, move, strength training, flexibility, keep stretching, and then get some good quality sleep. And if you do those things, it's amazing how much better you'll feel. So let's just kind of wrap up with this last thought on mission and really connecting purpose. Again, we talked about a lot of different things. These are, critical things to you. Number one, feeling better, to operating at a higher level, and but they're all difficult to change. And if you go back to that self-assessment, you're going to see there's a lot of stuff on there. I mean, I even look back on it all the time, and I'm like, oh, God, I really need to get on myself for that. These are difficult things to do, but come up with a purpose. And in the back of the workbook, there's all sorts of things that you can do, little workbook types of exercises where they'll help you come up with your purpose and a good reason. And if you're going to make that change, remember, as it relates back to, the New Year's resolution, without a really good reason for doing something that's very difficult, it's probably not going to stick. So think of something that's really important to you, whether that's a family member that you're doing it for, or a charitable purpose, or whatever it may be. Connect these things that you want to change to something greater than yourself, and you'll have a lot more luck accomplishing them. So with that being said, I think the workbook is going to be distributed, and there's tons of resources in the back. The glycemic information's in the back, and lots of different mission samples. Try to think what else is in this book. Meal planning, training logs, all of this stuff is in the back of the workbook. Lots of great resources for you. And I think with that being said, I'm going to just turn it back over to if Dennis is on. If not, we'll just wrap that up. So I think you got it. All right. So I think we're going to wrap it up for the day. It's my picture a couple of years ago, but it doesn't look that bad because I keep training, I guess. So I hope you all have a great weekend. And with that being said, we'll hope to see you all soon. Take care.